4748. A guest long overdue. We've been talking about getting her in studio, and she is here early in the morning. Looking like she just walked out of Wakanda or something. Wakanda. Is she up? Is her mic up? Zakiyah Ansari of the Alliance for Quality Education. And we were just together at a pop-up rally and town hall during Black and Puerto Rican Caucus weekend in Albany. And how are you? Good to see
I'm
you.
good. Good morning.
Welcome to Sirius XM. Thank you. And thanks for making the trip. Tell us about the Alliance for Quality Education, first of all.
So good morning, everyone. The Alliance for Quality Education is a statewide alliance. We're 18 years old. And we were created as an organizing arm to get an equity lawsuit that was brought by parents called the Campaign for Fiscal Equity. One was to push the public will, to push the political will to actually fulfill the promise that was supposed to be to fund our public schools for 4 years. So in 2006, after a 13-year battle just to get it to the highest court of appeals held up the decision and said, yes, the state is not meeting its constitutional obligation to provide every child with a sound basic education, and that there's funding that needs to be attached to it. And it's because of our organizing that we were able to get then Governor Spitzer to put this historic amount of money of over $5 billion into schools. And it was only supposed to be a 4-year commitment. And I'm sad to say that we're in 2018 and we still have yet to fully fulfill that promise of CFE.
So students are not getting adequate money from the state to support their education.
Absolutely.
And why is that? Is it because Albany allocates money elsewhere and doesn't prioritize education? Is that what's going on?
I often, early on, I didn't know what organizing was. And so it was just really being engaged as a parent. I didn't understand what organizing was. I just understood that there were things that our children were missing, and was able to foster a voice along with other parents and young people, even educators across the state, to say, where's the money, right? And so, but all these years of almost 20 years of doing educational justice work, it is clear to me that our children, which are Black and brown and poor children throughout the state, are not a priority. Because if it was, we would have figured out a way to fund this. And so we have a governor currently in office who says money doesn't matter. But we bring parents and students up to Albany every year to tell the impact of not funding schools. So whether it's they don't have access to guidance counselors or social workers, or they don't have libraries or librarians, or they don't have art or music, or all those amazing things that we know keep our kids most engaged in school, for the governor to say money doesn't matter, it's almost as if they're calling parents and students liars. And, I come up there, I'm a mother of 8, and when I started this, my son wasn't even born. He's about to graduate high school, go on to college, and we still have yet to fully fund CFE. It's criminal.
So is there any progress toward changing the mind of Cuomo and others in the State House to try to get this fully funded?
Yeah, I think, the Assembly has always been an ally to New York State Assembly members, and we have Speaker Carl Hastie up there now, who's been, last year it was clear this was his one of his talking points and one of his babies, along with raise the age. So that's awesome, but we can't do it with just one. We have a governor who keeps saying these things, talks about being progressive, but I challenge him to say, does he even know what progressive means? That's the goal of AQE, right? Is to push the public to constantly educate with political education around CFE that we haven't funded it, is to match the stories of parents and students because we know they are impacted by this. So what don't you have? Tell your legislator what it is you don't have and missing in school, which is why we constantly bring hundreds of parents up every year to Albany, but we also do work here locally to talk to your legislator and say that. So yes, it's all about public will to push the political will. There's no reason that currently we're owed $4.2 billion. $4.2 billion. So if you close your eyes as a parent, an educator, or someone and understands the impact of what $4.2 billion could do for our children, and knowing that all this money, 3/4 of the dollars would go to Black and Latino students specifically, but all of it would go to Black, brown, and poor children throughout every nook and cranny of this state. The question becomes, where are our priorities? And we refuse to prioritize these children, and we refuse to tax the millionaires and billionaires, and so therefore our children begin to suffer. over. It's been a generation. It's been 12 years. 12 years. I want to keep saying it. 12 years that we have decided as a state, which a budget should be a moral document,
right,
to not prioritize children.
So 12 years, and that dollar figure again is what?
$4.2 billion.
So, Zakiyah Ansari with us, folks. Quick calls on education, 866-99-SERIOUS, 866-997-4748. So, if it's $4 billion 12 years ago, doesn't that number have a cost of
what
living
is
increase?
It's $4.2 billion now, and that's exactly it.
Oh,
right?
so that's why it's, okay.
That's what we're owed now, but it's almost like we're back to
So
exactly,
it's been going up.
Yeah, you mean the amount owed. So we initially it was a commitment of $5.5 billion, but because, like you said, we're not even meeting up with the inflation every year.
Yeah.
It's like you're just being pushed back. So we're almost back to the same numbers that we were in 2006.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I mean the stories are clear. We can run them off. I can talk about a lot of things that my children had early on, and that some of the schools had to cut back on programs and bridge programs that were 6 weeks and now they're 3 weeks because they can't afford to do it. The stories of parents talking about how do you don't have a library or librarian in your school, or you don't have computers. Like we're in 2018, and so the stories are clear. And so I think we constantly see the systemic educational racism throughout the system, and it's about whether it's through educational equity around how we fund schools, whether it's through what we see around the school to prison pipeline. All those things are clear, and I would dare challenge to say there's state sanctioned violence on our children. I don't think that's too harsh to say when we see children and to hear their stories, and we hear parents' stories about how their children with special needs don't have access to resources and programs. Like, that's not okay, and we shouldn't be okay with that. And when we have a governor, a Senate Republican, and an IDC, Independent Democratic Conference, who consistently keep back CFE dollars, as well as affordable housing issues, as well as addressing women's rights issues, we have to question who are the communities being impacted by their lack of action on these things. And every time you turn around, it's Black, brown, and poor people.
866-99-SERIOUS, 10 minutes for the hour. So isn't it true, and I'm not 100% clear on this, but I think this is true in some states. I don't know if this is the case in New York, Zakiyah, whereas, we have all these lotteries. I know in some states, the lottery money was supposed to go to education budget, but it almost never happens in any state. Is that also the rule of thumb here in New York? Is that what's supposed to be happening?
Yeah. I mean, my understanding, I don't know the ins and intricacies of it, as opposed to just to be able to say that I do believe some of it goes to there, but it's almost like we want people to do a vice that's not even beneficial to them to pay for something that's a necessity, which is education, as opposed to us switching and figuring out how do we make those who make the most pay more because they're not paying their fair share now, and use those dollars that could be implemented and into the budget every year, billions of dollars, to fund our most marginalized communities, whether it's through education, affordable housing, or other things. We'd rather move towards these vices that are not even helpful or beneficial to communities. A matter of fact, and sometimes very detrimental to those folks. Yeah. And so while I do believe some of those dollars do go to education, it's not enough. And we have to shift our culture of thinking about how do we get these dollars, who can help and support our young people in our communities that are most marginalized. And at every turn, as we are seeing on the federal level, right, is this apprehension to make those who make the most. As a matter of fact, those who crash the market in the first place, who are richer than they were before they crashed the market, even pay their fair share now after they're richer than that, than they were before. It's again, it's a moral question I have to ask the state.
And they still aren't paying their fair share.
Absolutely.
But it seems to me like what you're saying too, without the lottery, the government, the state government, has the ability to come up with these monies and fully fund these schools.
Absolutely. I want to be clear. Like, again, as I said in the beginning, I didn't know I was coming up to Albany. I started with AQE as a parent volunteer many years ago. And then it wasn't until 2010 where I was able to, 2008, I'm sorry, when I was employed by them because of the work that I had been doing. But every year I was going up to Albany. We had a surplus and people were saying, we don't have money. With the market crash, we don't have money. The market rebound, we don't have money. And now what we're going to hear and what we've been hearing from the governor is that, the federal, we don't know what's going to happen. Well, what we do know is what we can only control, what we can control, which is the state budget. And we have left children, Black and brown children, in the cold. for almost 12 years of funding these schools. And what we can do and what we should be doing is making sure that if it is that we need to tax the rich because they're not paying their fair share, first of all, but whatever it is we need to do, we need to figure it out, as opposed to having a governor going out there with his rhetoric, money doesn't matter, we have to shut down the last monopoly, which is public education. That doesn't instill any sense of comfort in knowing that this governor is going to fight for my children or other children, right? And
Why
so we
call it
can do
monopoly?
things.
What does he mean?
Well, this was back in a few years ago when he was pushing and hitting hard on the teacher evaluation and testing. What we know is that the government gets a lot of money from private hedge funders and billionaires, and has for a number of years. As a matter of fact, when the whole thing with Harvey Weinstein came down, he was very quick to give back his dollars from Harvey Weinstein. But prior to that, we were pushing him to give back his dollars from one of his racist campaign donors, which is Dan Loeb, a hedge funder, who called our current should-be leader of the Senate, first African-American woman, Andrea Stewart Cousins, made her equivalent to, actually worse than, the KKK, right? And so we've been saying, and he still has not given back those dollars from this man. So all these things coupled together, it's not easy. It's not hard to put, things together and understand that if you're willing to keep those dollars, then where does racial justice stand in your vein?
Yeah. Cuomo's got a lot of issues. That's why. And I think he thinks he's going to run for president, too.
Oh, yeah. He has 2020 vision. As I said, I've been coming up to Albany for a number of years. I take it personally to make sure that if folks want to vote for him, that I will be everywhere I can be to say no. Because you don't get to be president doing what you're doing here. You just don't. You don't get to be able to say that I want to fund for pre-K for all 4-year-olds, but 80% of the state doesn't have access to full day pre-K. You don't get to do that. You don't get to say that you want to be president, but for 8 years that you've been in office, you have yet to fully fund CFE and call and say that money doesn't matter, right? You don't get to do those things. You just don't. You don't get to run for president. We have number 45 in office. We can no longer sit by and allow politics play out like it is. I learned very early on, or actually halfway through, how deep and entrenched politics is in education. Whether we like it or not, how do we figure out how to get it out of there? And if I can use my voice as I have and found my voice and use it to say no 2020 vision for him, that's what I will do.
We have no full day pre-K. Other states do, though, right?
Well, we're fortunate because we had a mayor in New York City who ran on that. That was his mantra.
Okay, so
in New York City, we have full day pre-K.
But in 80% of the state,
80% of the state, 4-year-old babies do not have access to universal pre-K, even though we have a governor who says he wants to fund that.
What's your website where people can find out more?
So www.aqeny.org. We're encouraging folks, please call the governor, call your state elected official. Just Google New York State Assembly, New York State Senate. Tell folks we need to fund CFE. We have a short window of opportunity right now. There will be 3 men in the room. That's the budget dance that happens every year. Call them today. Say fund our schools. $4.2 billion is owed. It's not okay that our children have had to. We've lost a generation of children who have not had opportunity, who have lost out on access because we have a state government who is in action, and we have a governor right now.
AQENY.org.
Yes.
All right. Here, Zakiyah Ansari of AQENY.org and Doro Malaje as well from Wakanda.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Wakanda forever. Thank you.
Thank you
For coming in.
Thank
Anything
you.
we can do to be supportive, let us know.
I appreciate it.
All right. We'll be back. This is MIP.